Welcome to Life After W-2. I'm your host, Jon Chan. After 17 years in corporate America, I made the leap to build my own business. It was messier than I thought it would be, but also full of valuable lessons I didn't know I needed. This show is about sharing shifts in mindset, pivots in strategy, and personal changes that come with pursuing financial freedom. You're not alone in this. We're all figuring it out, one step at a time. Welcome to Life After W-2. Mark Astor is an entrepreneur who built the nation's only law firm focused on mental health and addiction. He shares how he turned an overlooked need into a thriving business, the struggles he faced along the way, and why helping others drives his success. Let's dive in. At what point did you decide, I no longer want to do this, I want to branch off on my own? And then that little transition period of making that decision and then actually getting out.
So I think what's really important if you're going to do your own thing, right? Be an entrepreneur, open up a business. I think the first thing you have to decide is who do you want to help, right? And I use that word help because that's really what it's all about. It's about helping other people. It's about making a dent in the universe. If you're saying, well, I just want to make tons of money, I think that you're going to lose sight of what it's really all about. Obviously, if you can help a bunch of people, like lots and lots, like hundreds, thousands, whatever it was, you'll make money. And as you help more people, you'll make more money as a result of that. So I think the first thing is to say, okay, who do I want to help? Who's my target audience? Because if you don't know who you want to help, how do you market your business? Who do you market it to? Is there a certain age group, a certain demographic? I mean, whatever it happens to be, you have to figure out who you want to help. And once you figure out who you want to help, then everything else can start to build around it. Now, for me, being a lawyer, I think the big thing that really changed things for me was I met somebody who became a mentor to me that really opened up my eyes to the world of being an entrepreneur. And ironically, I had an entrepreneurial father. My dad, who's now been gone 9 years and didn't get to see pretty much any of this that we built. My dad left school at 14 and my mother left school at 16. So I didn't come from people that were educated. My father learned things by doing them, and he opened businesses. Some worked, some didn't. He made money, he lost money. And I tell my wife, I think all the mistakes my father made were not for his benefit, they were for mine. Because I watched him through his failures and successes, and I watched ultimately, what unfortunately did to him. But I met somebody, and I'm happy to share his information, but I met somebody that basically became a mentor to me. So there's a company down in Miami called How to Manage a Small Law Firm. They teach lawyers how to be entrepreneurs. Because you see that there's the practice of law and then there's the business, right? That does all the sales and the marketing and, makes the phone ring and all that other fun stuff. But they don't teach us that in law school. In fact, they don't teach any lawyer anywhere in any law school, anywhere in the country about being an entrepreneur. It's the same with doctors and chiros and dentists. You go to law school to learn about how to be a lawyer. And I use that word loosely because when you come out, you know a little bit of law, but you don't know how to use it, right? So that becomes its own struggle. And about 10 years ago, I got invited to a breakfast meeting to see a guy speak. His name was Jon Robbins. And Jon Robbins was talking to a group of about 20 lawyers about the business side of being a lawyer, being an entrepreneurial lawyer. And they looked at him, these lawyers looked at him like he had three heads. And frankly, they were downright rude to him. But that didn't surprise me because, as lawyers, we know everything, right? I mean, we could solve any problem. A lot of lawyers have a little bit of a God complex, and it's somewhat off-putting, which is why people don't like lawyers that much and make all these lawyer jokes. But for me, it was like the blinker suddenly came off. I said, wow, I could actually be an entrepreneur. I could take control of my own life and still practice law, which I had tried not to do for many years because I hated being a lawyer. And I saw him speak for about 2 hours. And after that, I begged him for a job. And I spent a year working for him, learning about being an entrepreneurial lawyer. But what I didn't realize when I begged him for the job was that what How to Manage really is at its very core is that they are a personal growth company for lawyers. And they believe that financial growth must be preceded by personal growth. And I spent a year there, not just learning about, the business side of practice and law, but the most important thing I got out of all of this was the reason that I had been unhappy, both personally and professionally, is that I didn't take 100% responsibility for my life. I didn't take responsibility for my failed marriage. I didn't take responsibility for the little businesses I dabbled in. I didn't take responsibility for any of it. And I said, okay, I'm going to finally take responsibility for these things, the good and the bad, right? The wins and the losses. And, when I spoke to Jon Robbins at the end of the year, I said, I'm ready to go and do my own thing. He said, okay, who do you want to help? And here's the irony of it. I had been surrounded by the people that needed my help the most for a long time. I've been surrounded by people who had who had family members who had issues with drugs and mental illness. It had affected my own family. And I said, okay, that's who I'm going to help. So that helped me to frame my target audience. Now, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I had been part of my background was I was a prosecutor for a long time. I've done criminal defense work for a long time. So I understood the criminal system. And I understood that people with behavioral health issues often ended up in the criminal system and might be a bunch of people that needed my help. But I didn't have any money for a law firm. At that point, I was broke. I'll share how I got to be broke, in a little bit. But needless to say, in February of 2016, I sat myself down in the local library here in Boca, and I just started calling people. The good thing about the library was they had free Wi-Fi and they had a little a little coffee shop that had half decent cheap coffee. I also got the cheapest business cards you could possibly get made from Vistaprint, and I drove around to treatment centers and I handed out my business card. So I just literally smiled and dialed, and I made appointments with people that over coffee and lunch, anybody that would hear what I was trying to do. Now, for the first year, I took lots of different kinds of cases. I took criminal cases. I took family law cases. And I would co-counsel with somebody else that I went to law school with who knew more about family law than me. And 11 months in, I lost my dad. So this was a difficult time for me. And I was pretty much broke. So, trying to find money to pay for a funeral was an exercise that I wouldn't want to go through again. But after the first year, I had enough money where I could actually get a physical office. So I moved out of the library and I got an executive suite. And the first office I had was just a tiny bit bigger than the desk that was sitting in it. So I had enough room to walk around. I always remember, at 2, 3 o'clock when the sun would come up, it would burn the back of my head because the sun was coming through the window. There were no blinds on the windows. So, and I actually ended up meeting my wife that second year because she also had an office in the same executive suite. And for the first 7 years, we hustled. We worked 8 days a week, 25 hours a day. I mean, we're coming up on the 10th anniversary, John, and I still take calls on the weekend. I think the most important thing, other than taking responsibility and finding a target audience, is you have to hustle like crazy. You really do. I mean, there's no shortcuts here to building a business. You got to hustle. You got to meet people. You got to share your vision, and you have to have a very narrow vision too. So, and a mission. So for us, the mission, it's right smack on the front of our website, is to save families whose loved ones are suffering from substance use, mental health disorders, and failed attempts at recovery. And so who's my target audience? Well, typically it's going to be mums and dads who have an adult child with a long history of drug use and mental illness and treatment that doesn't work. And they've probably had some involvement, in either the state's criminal justice system or the state's mental health system. So I said, okay, I got to go find those people. And, initially I didn't have any money to pay for marketing. So it was about going to treatment centers and making appointments to go and see clinicians and, trying to go to conferences and things of that nature. So it's been a real grind. I mean, I'll give you, for instance, we're doing a podcast right now. I'm going to a lunchtime presentation for the local bar because there's going to be other lawyers there that I'm going to meet. Then I'm coming home. Then I'm getting interviewed by a local newspaper about some of the work we do. Then I'm recording another podcast later today. That is typically my day. Even 10 years in, I still hustle and grind and push because I want the business to grow, because I want to help more people. I mean, it never really ends, So that's a little bit about me.
That reminds me, I mean, you had a bunch of really good nuggets in here. First, when you first got started running your own business, you were taking on all kinds of cases, right?
I
And
did.
then it started, as you started to take on these cases, your focus started to narrow to this is what I like to do. These are things I don't like to do. And I mean, I'm assuming that once you start to narrow your focus, is that where business really started to grow exponentially?
Yeah. I mean, I did not get my first behavioral health case, the kind of case that we would handle today. It took 14 months for that first call to come. And I remember it coming. It was from a colleague of mine who said, hey, I've got this Marchman Act case. The Marchman Act is a statute we use here in Florida to get people into treatment. It's just one of the statutes. Do you want the case? And I was like, fine. I was deliriously happy. Now, I'd never handled one of these before. I had a general idea how the statute works. So I co-counseled it with another lawyer. And that was the beginning. And so, that was the first case. I never forget that feeling. It was like, wow, finally, all the hustling is starting to pay off. But, but I think being an entrepreneur is also about adapting and overcoming. So, COVID came along and, my wife and I, and by the way, she didn't become my wife until about a year and 9 months ago. So, like I said, I took responsibility finally for my personal life as well as my professional life. And, I committed to her fully. But COVID came along and that changed everything. We had these 2 executive suites that were costing us a small fortune, and we were in a 12,000 square foot building. Nobody else was there. Clients didn't want to come in and meet with us. So we said, this is insane. Why don't we take the business virtual? So we built out a couple of offices in the house. Now, ironically, 10 years in, we still have one of those offices in that same executive suite that we had. And we still occasionally go to meet with clients, but we're virtual, right? We went from just the two of us for the first 7 years, and the last 2 and a bit years, we built out a team. There's now 12 of us. I now have 12 people working for me, and they're spread all over the place. Half of them are in Florida. The rest are spread all over the country. One is even Colombia. So we invested in technology that helps us all stay connected. And during COVID, a lot of our hearings, instead of being in person, went on Zoom, which meant I no longer was restricted geographically. So now I can handle cases all over the state because I don't have to drive anywhere. And for the most part, our hearings have stayed on Zoom, although occasionally we have to drive somewhere. But I have 2 associates now, brilliant lawyers, much better than me. And so if there's a hearing that has to be done in person, they go. So, again, building the team is really about hiring people that not only can do it as well as you, but better. The 2 lawyers I have that we hired, they're both of them much better lawyers than me. I go to them and say, hey, what do you think? So you got to surround yourself with really good people too. That's a struggle in and of itself, building a great team that share the mission and the core values of the firm and understand what you're really here for. So, again, it's about evolving and adapting and overcoming and constantly working on things, tracking your numbers, all of this stuff. So
Yeah.
it just doesn't, it just doesn't happen by accident. It really doesn't.
I mean, obviously, because first you decide that you want to go on this path, and the first thing you did was ask that person, that individual, for a job. You didn't just say, I'm going to go out and do it on my own.
Oh, I
And
begged
then
him
when
for a
you,
job. I
yeah,
begged
you
him.
begged them for a job, right?
I said, I
So
need this job.
you made that opportunity happen. And then you finally get the type of case that you want. And instead of going out and trying to figure it out on your own, you go find someone who's got that experience, you work with them, and then you learn from them.
I did, and I was able to open a website. I never forget the first marketing check I cut was for $1,250. And I said, I hope this thing doesn't bounce. I mean, now I sort of, I laugh at how much we spend. We spend about 10 times that on marketing every month, not including, any networking stuff I do as well. But I think about, what it was like. And you know what? Here's what else. A couple of things that I think are also important. Number one, I've literally tracked every nickel that's come in the business since we opened up the doors. I have a spreadsheet that goes back all the way to February of 2016. Tracked every penny. Now, is it exact? Probably not. But it's really for me. It's not necessarily for my bookkeeper or my CPA. But it allows me to see where where we've come from. Right. So I know if I say, oh, we're having a down month. Well, what was it like 12 months ago? Turns out we're not having a down month. We've actually grown 20%. But that's an important piece. The other thing I think is important is to find people that can motivate you. So for me, one of the people that I really was motivated by was Grant Cardone. I don't know if you know who Grant Cardone is. I'm sure that you
I
do.
do.
And ironically, Grant Cardone is in recovery. So that immediately to me, I could really relate to that because that's, we work in the recovery industry. Somebody like Grant came from absolutely nothing. He's a kid from Louisiana. And when he was a teenager, his father dropped dead, I think at 52 or 53 of a heart attack. And so there he was with a single mom who was working 2 jobs to put food on the table. He got himself all wrapped up in drugs. And it wasn't until some drug dealer cracked him over the head with a pistol and cut his head open that it woke him up. And now he has this like $4 billion, real estate empire. But he's written a bunch of books. And, so I'm not a big reader, but I'll always listen to an audiobook when I'm in the gym working out. And I listen to a lot of his things. And he talked about some of the things that I think are important, one of which I think is the idea that you can't build a business by sitting behind a desk. You got to get out there and meet people, right? I mean, obviously I'm behind a desk now, but, in 2 hours, I'm going to be having a luncheon with a bunch of lawyers. Because there might be referral sources for me, but there are also people that I might be able to refer business to, because I get calls from families who say, oh, I may not want to do this, but maybe I need a family lawyer, so I can help them and say, hey, I've got a couple of lawyers here I'm going to refer you to. So it's not always about what it can do for me. It's about sometimes what can it do for the client? What can it do for these other lawyers? Sometimes it's about giving back so that you can receive. It's not always about taking. And so, I mean, there's just a couple of things that we've, that I try to do on a daily basis.
Yeah, it takes it back to serve first, help people, and then the money will come in. I mean, that's something that I was always told as a kid, but I never really realized it until jumping out on our own. So
Yeah.
you talked about financial struggles. When you decided to make that leap, did you expect it to go more smooth than it went? Well, how messy was it?
Well, I mean, because I mentioned that I lost my dad 11 months in. The first 2 years I had the business, I was living with my mom. My dad was gone, so it was first of all, I wanted to take care of support my mom, just emotionally, but obviously financially, was able to help too, because as the business grew, I was able to, that was one of the benefits. I was able to, help my mom. But I didn't have the money to go and rent an apartment down here in South Florida, and my credit was shot because I'd made such a mess of my own finances for many years that I don't, no one was going to let, even if I had the money, no one was going to let me lease an apartment. Right. So that's what I did. And, after I think it was year 3, I was finally able to get a small apartment and my credit got better. And every year was an evolution. Right. And that's what it's about. It's about evolving. The business evolves. I evolved as a person. I became a husband and a stepdad. But I think that, at least for me, I work on the business every day, but I also try to work on myself. Because there are days I get up and I'm like, oh my God, do I really have to go and do this? Right. And then I say to myself, okay, remember 10 years ago when your ass was broke and you couldn't make a car payment and the car, the lease company wanted to repossess your car? Okay, let's get up and go. One of the other things I learned from Arjun Robbins is that you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Sometimes you're going to need to do things that make you feel uncomfortable. And it's doing those things that your competition is not willing to do that's the game changer. It really is. Do things that make you uncomfortable because those are the things that your competition's not going to do. And that's going to help you to win. I
That's
still
so
take
good.
calls on the
Yeah.
weekend. I still take calls after hours. I spend time on the phone with my staff, especially my intake team. They're my sales team, and I coach them, right? Because one of the things I realized early on was, as a lawyer, I knew nothing about sales. Well, if you can't sell, you can't. There's no money coming in. I had to go hire somebody to teach me how to sell, and so I invest in my team. I send them to workshops. I spend time with them. It's like working out, right? It's like exercising. You got to keep doing it, or you just get out of shape, and 58, I turn into a blob. It's a constant grind. Now, I have also hired staff where I've delegated certain things to, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. It really is. The buck stops with me. If my staff don't do a good job, then I did something wrong. I failed them. Now, and maybe they're also not a good fit, but you got to, if you hire somebody, you have to give them an opportunity to succeed too. Because if they succeed, the rest of the team succeeds and your clients succeed, and that helps the business to grow.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've said so many good things, made so many really good points. I have a question for you. So, if someone listening is stuck in their 9 to 5, what's the first thing they should do tonight?
Well, I mean, I think that you have to make the commitment that you want to do this, right? And I certainly understand, right, that if you have bills to pay, if you have a family to take care of, you suddenly take that leap and there's no money coming in, that's a problem. So maybe you want to figure out how can you start to do this, maybe initially as a way to supplement income as opposed to replace it. Because I certainly understand. I mean, I was lucky. I at least at least I could go live with my mom. And I tell this to my stepchildren, I don't come from a wealthy family. My father had many successes, but he had many failures too. So there was no safety net there 10 years ago, and there's still no safety net. I have to work on the business. So I sell legal services so I can pay my bills. So I understand that. So I think for somebody who's got a 9 to 5 job, I think you have to really, well, number one, sit down and figure out who you're going to help, how you're going to do it, at least to a certain degree, and then maybe start to do it slowly and start to share your vision with other people. Right, as opposed to just going completely cold turkey, jumping off the cliff and hoping that you can fly. So I think that's an important thing, right? Try and get as many of the details figured out if you can. Now, if you have a small nest egg that you can use, then maybe you can take that big leap of faith. But I think you have to have your mission really dialed in as to who you're trying to help. I mean, it's like if you're gonna, for instance, if you want to sell cars, well, what kind of cars do you want to sell? You want to sell pickup trucks or sports cars? Do you want to sell Fords or Chevys? Do you want to sell blue cars or red cars? I think it's important to know who your target audience is and try and figure that out. It might change. It has for us because our industry changed. But I think you got to try and figure that bit out first, as opposed to, well, I'm just going to go sell cars, right? I think that's a way too big a net to try and cast. And then maybe start to do it slowly, have a little bit of a game plan. How am I going to meet these folks? All of that stuff. And then slowly move into it. On the other hand, if you're completely miserable and you're not making enough money anyway, well, what difference does it make? What do you have to lose? And what do you have to gain?
Right. Yeah, that's so good. I mean, that was one of the mistakes I made when I made the jump. I didn't have a clear vision of who I was helping and how I was going to help them. I just knew that I wanted to start. So for me, it seems extremely messy, but I did have the backup too. Like I had the safety net of I had these rental properties and everything. But yeah, having a clear mission of who you want to help and how you want to help them is, even if it does change, I think is really good advice.
I think the
So
other thing, John, one other thing is I think it's important to I'm not a religious guy, but I love that sometimes the universe talks to you. In part of my journey was I had run off to California for 3 years in 2010. It took what I had left after the '08 crash, and I basically spent 3 years out in California, tripping the light, fantastic, having a good time. There was one thing that happened to me out there that really changed the direction. I took the bar out there. I ended up taking the California bar 3 times, and I failed at all 3 times. I studied for the Florida bar for 3 weeks and passed it. I was working while I was studying for Florida bar. I studied for a year for the California bar and didn't pass it. And friends were saying to me, maybe you're not supposed to be in California. Maybe you're supposed to be back in Florida. And it wasn't until I came back to Florida, one, because I couldn't pass the bar, which meant I couldn't make a living, and two, because I was broke at that point. I'd spent all my money. Then I met Jon Robbins and got that job that got me on my journey. So sometimes you can't force that square peg into the round hole. You kind of have to listen. And that means you got to be quiet now and just listen to, because the universe will nudge you. And if you don't take the nudge, it'll kick you in the ass until you do listen. So sometimes the flags that it's there, you just got to step back and say, okay, what's my calling here?
yeah, that's such good advice. I've gone through the same thing where I thought that I was supposed to go this one route and it didn't fit. I was working so hard to make it fit and it just didn't. And then just looking at the people I was surrounded with, realizing, oh, these are people that I can help in a different way.
Right. And it might change. Your target audience may change over time.
Yeah, yeah, and that's okay. I mean, as long as to me, like getting started is one of the biggest hurdles. I mean, if you get started, then you start building momentum, and then things start to just kind of fall in place and kind of guide you. And you're right. Like when before going on this journey, I was never religious or spiritual, but then it's kind of grown into that because you have to. It's such a difficult path and difficult journey that sometimes you just need little bit of extra encouragement.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, John, is sometimes people get very caught up in the how, right?
Mm.
And I said to myself, okay, I know where I am now. One of the things that's really important is we set a lot of goals, right? And there was a really great book, an audio book that I listened to. It's called The Stranger's Secret. It was written in the 60s. I'll look up the author, but it's called The Stranger's Secret. It's literally a 45-minute audiobook. And you can tell it was recorded in the 60s because you can hear the crackling as it's playing. And the author, for the life of me, I can't remember his name now, but he talked about the importance of having goals, right? So we try to set a lot of goals, but sometimes I'll say to myself, okay, here's where I am now and here's where I want to get. Where I want to get to. That's my goal. You don't have to know all of the details as to how to get there. The most important thing is to take action and start doing it. And the universe will nudge you. I mean, I know a lot of people say, oh, I need a business plan. No, you don't. You don't need a business plan. You just need to start doing it. I didn't write a business plan for years after we started doing things. And that was only because I started to set more goals. And I said, okay, I need a business plan. Here's where I am. Here's where I need to get. The business plan will help me to track things and, track a path, but it changes every year. The plan changes. So I think you try not to get too caught up in the details. Just say, okay, this is who I'm going to help, and start trying to help them, right? Start telling people about who you're trying to help. And it may turn out that that's not the group, or there's a different path. I mean, for us, right, COVID came along and then they legalized marijuana here in Florida. Well, in February of 16, most of my cases were trying to help families who had a loved one who was really suffering from the abuse of alcohol and recreational drugs. Well, COVID came along, marijuana got legalized, and that changed the nature of our cases. Most of our cases now are really driven by severe and clinically challenging mental illness. So we handle those cases differently. I've got, for instance, I've got different team members. Like I have clinicians on staff that help me with those cases so we can find the right place. But the business evolved and we adapted. During COVID, people started getting sucked into Florida's broken mental health system. Another lawyer said, hey, can you help my clients get out? And I built a whole other business that, it's part of what we do, getting people out of Florida's mental health system. I'm probably the state's leading expert on that stuff. I file 100, 150 cases every year to get people out of Florida's mental health system. But that came about because we had COVID and people started getting sucked in and couldn't get out. And I was like, these people need my help. And the phone started to ring, and I basically figured out, how do we get them out? I adapted, I overcame. I just started to do it. And I launched a new website, and we launched new marketing for those things. So, sometimes opportunities come along if you listen and you pay attention to what's going on. And I don't know what'll happen next year. Maybe in 2026, there'll be a different issue that comes up, and we'll have to address it, and we'll figure out how to adapt and overcome and market to those people and find those people that are going to need our help. The business evolves over time. It just does. I mean, we evolve as individuals. So does our business. You either adapt and
Yeah.
change, or you go out of business.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, everything always changes and you have to be ready for it. There's always a way to make money and there's always a way to be successful. It's like, can you figure out how to do it? Can you tweak your plan? Can you tweak what you do to get there?
I have a Wall Street client I've represented on and off for about 8 years. He's also in recovery, by the way. And he says on Wall Street, they have a saying, from violence comes opportunity. And I really took that to heart. And I'm not advocating being violent. My point is that when there's mayhem going on, there's also opportunity. People need help, whatever that may
Yeah,
be.
it's so true. It's so true. I got a question about mindset. What's
Yeah.
one of the biggest mindset hurdles you've had to overcome to go from being employee to entrepreneur?
That's a great question, John. So Grant Cardone has this book. It's called, what's it called? It's called The Millionaire Booklet. It's literally, you can listen to it in like 3 hours. It's like $5 to download it. And he talks about, because we all have these beliefs about money, right? Money's good, money's bad. I was raised in somewhat of a religious family where, money's the root of all evil, all that kind of stuff. And he addresses that and he says, look, money is not about, being good or being bad, right? It doesn't make you a good person if you don't have any, doesn't make you a bad person if you do. What money is about giving you freedom to make choices. That's what it does, right? My wife and I like to travel. So we've used some of the money that we have to do some traveling because we love seeing different things. But one of the other choices that we exercise is we took some of the money and we put it back into the business so we could hire staff, so we could not only grow the business, but give up a better experience for our clients, right? So I think that's really important. If you could also give to charity. One of the things that we've really gotten involved in the last year is there's a lot of events that are going on, you know, um, you know, charitable events. We've been sponsoring some of these. It's such an amazing thing, right? We're sponsoring. There's a local charity that raises money for children that have suffered trauma. They're doing an event in a couple of weeks. We sponsored it. We gave them a couple $1,000 and we're putting our name out there and we're sponsoring. Yesterday I got a chance to see. So at Florida Atlantic University, a friend of mine who I've known for 35 years became the president of the school. Really exciting times. He's doing all these amazing things, fundraising stuff. But he sent me a text this morning saying, hey, we're trying to raise money so that people that cannot afford to go to college can go to college. Can you give us some money? I was like, yeah, of course. I went online and I gave him some money. I'm giving back to the community so we can make a difference. I may not ever meet anybody that goes to FAU because I gave some money. But the
Right.
point is, one of the benefits of helping a bunch of people is we can give back. And I can't tell you how good that feels, right? It's such an amazing feeling to give back. And, it's great. We're going to go to this event. I think there's a barbecue we're also going to on Sunday where we've given some money and we're going to get involved in the community and help it. So by one of the byproducts is we get to go to these events as a sponsor and I get to tell a bunch of people, hey, this is what we do. I guarantee there'll be at least somebody there that says, we need to talk. It always
Yeah.
happens. I've become a Florida Bar continuing education provider. 2 weeks ago, I gave a presentation. It was a dinner, which we sponsored. 40 lawyers and 4 of the judges were there. Right. And we talked about what we do. Afterwards, a couple of lawyers reached out to me and said, hey, we have clients who, that have these issues. But we started off by saying, we're going to give back to the local bar, right? We're going to help pay for a dinner so that, lawyers can come together, share their missions, connect with the judges. And so that has been a really powerful thing for us, right? Is being able to give back. And that's I know it's going to reward us. And even if it doesn't, it just feels really good to be able to help other people, right? So some of our struggles to build this business has resulted in us being able to help other people, not just clients, but people in the community where we live, where my mother lives, where my in-laws live.
Yeah,
That's powerful because now you can start to make a difference, and that's when you make a really big dent in the universe. That's
it's
that's that's good stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I've always heard these successful people saying that money just amplifies who you are. It doesn't change who you are. And I've also heard someone else say, well, how many people can $100 help? How many people can $1,000 help? And so it's about, yes, money is a tool, but it's not everything. It's just something that allows you to either help more people. It affords you a lot more options.
Right. It's not about making you a good person or a bad person.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a jerk, you're a jerk. I mean, that's
Yeah.
having money or not having money is not going to change that. If you're a good
Yeah.
person, you're a good person.
Yeah. So going back to uh, your time when you've made that decision, knowing what you know now, what's some advice you'd give to yourself, the version of you that wanted to go out on your own?
I probably would have done it a lot earlier, but I needed to go through I needed to hit rock bottom before I was willing to do what needed to be done. I needed to take responsibility. Now, I had done it earlier. I mean, there was a time in my life where I was very well off financially, but I didn't appreciate it. I really didn't. And I think part of the problem is that, when money comes quickly, it also tends to go quickly. And, and I think the other thing is that you have to have gratitude because when I had it, I didn't have any gratitude for it. I didn't appreciate the power of the ability to go and help other people because it probably came a little bit easy. I was working in a family business. I had a criminal defense practice on the side with another friend of mine and money was flowing and, but I also didn't have anybody special in my life to share it with. So I was, wasting it on material things. And I like material things as much as the next person, but you can't use material things as a vehicle to fill a void of unhappiness. And that's what I was doing. My happiness now comes from helping other people, right? And as a result, I attracted an amazing wife and stepchildren, all that other stuff. But if I could have experienced gratitude 10 years earlier than I did and taken responsibility 10 years earlier than I did, then maybe I'd already be retired. But my wife, when I tell my wife that, she's like, you're not going to be able to retire. She's like, you like running around with your hair on fire. What are you talking about? She's like, if you're not in the middle of the fight, right, the struggle, she's like,
Yeah.
you're miserable. So she said, you cannot retire. You'll have to rewire. So I said to myself, okay, how much longer do I want to continue to work? And when I stop working, who else am I going to help? So I'll give you an example of the universe in action. Yes, I told you we went to a luncheon, the local bar association. My buddy, who's the new president of FAU, we're speaking, and he happened to mention that they have this, like they have a criminal justice program as part of Florida Atlantic, where kids can learn about basically become pre-law. So I said, wow, man, I'd love to teach. So as he was walking out, I said, how do I help? He said, hold on a second. The dean of that particular department was at the luncheon. He connected me with the dean. So I said to myself, maybe in years to come, I'll become like a professor and teach the next generation of lawyers. And so I said to myself, I'm going to need something where I'm making a difference, where I'm making a small dent in the universe. This past year, we had 3 interns. One was graduating high school, going into law, going to college. One was getting out of college, and we helped her to get into law school. And the other one was in her first year, going into her second year of law school. And we mentored these 3 amazing women. And I can't tell you how amazing that really felt. I mean, we paid them. We weren't expecting free work, but we made a difference in their lives. And that being able to mentor the next generation I can't tell you how powerful that is and how good it makes you feel. There's no money that can replace that. And so again, it's like, okay, how do I go from this group of people that I'm going to help to the next group of people that I'm going to help? So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for what's the next thing that's going to stimulate me? Not necessarily put money in my pocket, but that's going to enable me to make a small dent in the universe, contribute to the community, make a difference, help somebody else. And so I think maybe teaching, becoming a professor would be something I would enjoy. Again, just listening to the universe. Let's just listening for a second.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Mark, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for
John.
sharing your journey. So how can people reach out to you and work with you?
Yeah. So our main website is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. The main number to the office is 561-419-6095. Or just Google me, Mark Astor. So when I talk about giving back, one of the other things I do is I put out I do a video every single day and I put it out on all the different social media platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Vimeo. I'm not a tech guy, but I sort of got that down. And the reason I do that is because I think that people need need information about how we might better help them, and they shouldn't have to pay me to get it. And you can Google certain things, right? But the internet's full of garbage. It's full of people that don't know what they're talking about or misinformation. So I do a video every day. I shoot it on my phone. I upload it to all these different social media platforms so that families can get the information that they need from someone who has experience handling the kinds of matters that they're now dealing with. And if they want to have a conversation with us, they can call my intake team. They can talk to us for free. Well, I've got a couple of ebooks. You can have them for free. So I'm all over the internet, and the information you need is there for free. You just have to go find it. It's easy.
So what we'll do is we'll make sure to have all those links in the description just to
Thank you.
make life easier for everyone. And Mark, thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you, John. Nice to be here. And listen, you're an inspirational guy. You're going to make a big dent in the universe. You may not know it, but you're going to.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Life After W2. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you want to learn how to take control of your retirement money, grab my self-directed retirement account starter toolkit. I usually charge for it, but you can get it for free with discount code podcast. You'll find the link in the show notes. See you in the next episode.